Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. Today we're taking a look at a pretty cool recent offering from Steel Will. And I have to say, guys, I've been pretty impressed with Steel Will, more than once. Initially, they made a big splash with the Gecko, and that's a great knife, and people still love it. And a year ago or so, maybe a little over that, I reviewed the Mini Gecko, and it was very, very good. The Tasso, and more this year, they've got the Tasso and the Tasso Mini, great knives. Definitely the large Tasso will be on my best of 2019 list. But recently, they've had the Apostate Mini, which is actually a fairly large knife. The Guiana, both of which are really nice, and this knife right here. Now, this knife, I have to say, is a design that I appreciate quite a bit. And, it's always one of those things where you're not sure what exactly you're going to think of a knife once you get it in hand. But I have to tell you that this is a knife that, now that I've had it for some time and I've been able to do some cutting with it and I've been able to carry it, I am more and more impressed with it as time goes on. This is really, really well done. This is the Shaula, and it's an interesting knife from Steel Will. It's a little bit, it's nicer materials, a little bit perhaps better put together than the Cutjack Modus line with the plastic handles. So this has G10, it's got bearings where the Cutjack, the Modus were FRN with washers. And then of course, both of those knives, you could go up to the higher end version. So this is kind of a middle of the road offering from Steel Will, where it's not, they haven't gone to the full budget end of their spectrum. I think a Cutjack these days is like $42 and this is like $51. I'm kind of rounding there. But that kind of gives you an idea where this lands in terms of price point. And so I've got to tell you guys, I would have said before that the best budget model from Steel Will was the Cutjack, and I still like the Cutjack a lot. It's a really nice knife, but this to me has actually surpassed it at this point. I wouldn't really call either of them heavy duty or hard use, but this is a pretty nice knife, and the action is one of those things that really stands out to me. The action on this is very, very impressive. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's stop and take a quick look at the size and weight on this, which is 8 1/8 inches overall. Okay, so 8 1/8 overall, 3 7/16 on the blade, so just a hair under 3.5 inches there. But notice that you get every bit of that as cutting edge, which I do really like. 4 11/16 on the handle, so just a little under 4 3/4. All right, so not a big knife. Now, this is one thing that I really, really like about this knife. This does not take up a lot of pocket space. This is very, very slim and not noticeable in pocket. And part of that is because when it's folded up, it's pretty stinking small. And yet, they've still done a pretty good job with grip area. So 3 3/4. 3 3/4 is not huge. And I could foresee someone with hands that are way bigger than mine finding this not big enough. All right. But I mean, I've got fairly large hands. Most of the time, most of the time I complain about a knife with that I don't feel like has enough grip. So I think this is going to be good for most people. And finally, the weight on this, 3.6 ounces, which is, completely great. I mean, no issue whatsoever with that weight. So size and weight on this is really good. It's right in that sweet spot where it's just a little over 8 inches, but it's nice and light, very, very easy to carry, and yet delivers a very usable folder, right? Of course, it's easy to make a knife really small and hardly noticeable, but to get a knife that's very easy to carry, not hardly noticeable in pocket, but still is a substantial cutting tool, that's a bit more of a challenge, and they've done a really nice job getting that done. Let's talk a little bit about the blade here. So fairly standard traditional blade. I've got some fingerprints on it. Let's see if I can clean it up for you a little bit. I think I might make it worse. I don't know. Maybe that's better, maybe not. Blade though here is a pretty standard shape, right? We've got a clip point with a bit of a swedge up here. We've seen that done in lots of different knives before. We've got a high flat grind, but not a full flat grind. And it actually makes this blade pretty balanced. It's thin behind the edge, but it's thick enough in the stock. So it's not crazy thick stock. It's under 1/8 of an inch thick, but it ends up being nicely balanced. So it's thin enough behind the edge to cut well, but there's enough material here that it's going to be a pretty strong, reliable blade as well. D2 steel satin finish. It is available, by the way, in like a black wash or something like that. You guys know how I feel about black wash blades. D2 steel is fine in this, in this implementation. Of course, I feel like I've brought this up a number of times recently, but it would be great if this was like 14C28N or something along those lines. But the D2 is absolutely fine. And so overall, my thoughts on this blade, yeah, I like it quite a lot. The performance for me has been very good and very general. And this is what I think an EDC blade should strive for, to be in that nice middle ground, right? I don't want a paring knife, and I don't necessarily want some hulking thing. Sometimes I do want that, but generally speaking, I'd like to find something that's relatively well balanced, and this really does a nice job of giving me a blade that I can feel pretty comfortable with, and not be afraid of breaking or damaging in any way, while still a blade that will do most cutting tasks, even going into some food prep. Although, as I've often said, I don't really use my folder for that, but I know some people do, and it's nice to have that capability in case it comes up, you're outside camping or something like that. Let's move on now from the blade, which I do like, to lockup and deployment. You can see this is a liner lock on bearings, nice big pivot screw there, which is really more of a handle feature than a deployment feature, but I'll tell you anyway. Some really nice jimping here. So watch, my finger does kind of stick to that just enough. Like, it's not uncomfortable, it's not annoying, but it's just enough that I can be confident that I'm not going to slip off, that the knife's going to deploy every time when I want it to. The detent is good. It's perhaps a little soft. I don't know, maybe that's not fair. It's not really soft, it's just comfortable. And again, that's sort of the theme here. Very, very nice. In terms of the action, check that out. Nice, smooth drop shut action. Now, does it feel like a Shirogorov or a Riot or something like that? Well, no, it's not quite that refined, but very, very nice, especially at this price point. This easily compares with other knives in a similar price point, and in fact beats many of them. So lots of credit goes to how nice this action is. I must point out, oh, by the way, the flipper tab is comfortable and accessible, as is the lock bar. So all of those things. Lockup is very solid. There's no blade movement at all, up and down or side to side. It's really, really good. All right. I bet at this point, I pretty much would expect that from Steel Will. I know some guys talked to me about their cut jacks, where they couldn't get good action out of them with the washers without introducing a bit of blade play. To me, that's a fail. I can't deal with that blade play at all. It drives me insane. But I know some of you mentioned that. Anyway, this is good. Solid as a rock and still very, very smooth. Now, of course, having bearings in this knife does open it up to some limitations, okay? If you work at the concrete factory with dust in the air all the time, if you're a professional drywaller, something like that, this is not going to be the knife for you. If your uses don't normally involve a lot of dust and dirt and grime, if you don't anticipate, dropping your knife into a mud puddle, then this is great. And honestly, guys, I have a lot of knives with bearings, and well, I certainly would not argue, and many of you pointed out, I would never argue with the fact that bearings do introduce a point of failure. They absolutely do. But for my uses, I'm in an office, a good portion of every day, probably half of at least every day, and then I'm out and about in the world the rest of the day. I don't usually have problems. One, it's going to be in my pocket. So even if I'm doing something dirty and dusty and disgusting, it's pretty protected in your pocket. And from time to time, if I've got to blow out the action or put a little KPL in there or something like that, I have no problem with doing that. All right, moving on to the handle. The handle is G10, so we've got a G10 liner lock here. I do like to see the G10. I prefer it over FRN. And for me, that's one of the areas that stands out. I also like this texturing. The larger brick pattern texturing is a good balance. It's grippy, but it's not like tearing your hand off or tearing up your pants all that badly. So I will say I like the way they've done the I like the way they've done the patterning in the G10. I like the way they've chamfered all the edges. We've got, let's see if I can show you. Let's open this blade here. There we go. You can see they've lightened that up quite a bit with some holes. We've got nice bright blue standoffs and a nice bright blue lanyard post there, all very attractive. There are some color variations of this. Like I mentioned, there's a black blade. There's also like red and blue and orange or something like that. There's some other colors available in G10, and when you get those other colors, the backspacers are going to be different. Now, Nice deep carry clip, and here is a thing, okay? This is important to notice, especially if you're some other company watching this. See how they put in countersunk screws into that spot under the clip. That's really important, okay? You don't want the raised screws there. You want it to be nice and flat so that my pants can just drop right in. By the way, if you flip this guy over, you can see that that is a movable clip, but you're gonna have to take this screw out, right? Flip the clip over and put that screw, replace it over on the other side. All right, that's, so maybe an extra step there, but not anything to complain about as far as I'm concerned. I guess we should point out they've got this nice big decorative pivot here. Either you love it, you hate it, I don't know. I think it adds a little bit of pop to the design a little bit, and I'm always in favor of that. I mean, it certainly doesn't take anything away, doesn't damage the function of the knife in any way, and it just adds a little bit of character, if you will. So I like the way this is put together. In terms of ergonomics, it's also very good. And this is something you can, when I see a knife that's this thin, I can sometimes get a little nervous because a thin knife often isn't as hand-filling, and therefore, for really hard work isn't going to feel as good. But this is quite nice, and they've done a great job. I think more just the contouring of the handle and the extra width provided by those G10 scales is what makes this kind of workable. All right, various grips. Yeah, it works good. Again, I always feel like an idiot doing these different grips. I want to ask you guys permission. Do I have to talk about reverse grip and, this grip and that grip? Or can I just be like, yeah, hammer grip, saber grip? Those are the two grips that I really care about. I don't run around, cutting stuff with my knife like this. I just don't. If you guys do and you want me to make a point about it in every review, let me know. But I'd be just as happy to tell you it's comfortable without flipping it around in 16 different grips, because I use one of those grips all the time. Anyway, let me know what you think about that in the comments below. If you really want me to, I can keep flipping the knife around and pretending I'm gonna, I don't know, go psycho on someone and give them the old rah, 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 rah. But I just don't hold the knife like that. So overall, do I like this handle? Yes, I like the way it's put together. I really like the feel in hand. So it's very comfortable. It's very grippy. The clip does not create any kind of a hot spot for me. So I'm really, really happy with this. Let's get to a couple of comparisons. I don't have a ton of comparisons, but I do think it's worth throwing a Para 2 in here since everyone is kind of familiar with that. This is just a little bit smaller than a Para 2. Spyderco Indela. Again, fairly popular model these days. Very similar in size, okay, but there's a couple of significant factors that are different here. What else have I got? Oh, Bestech would be probably a comparable. There's some comparable Bestechs out there, and Bestechs tend to have action that's very nice as well. So we're looking like a G10 liner lock with really nice action. Bestech would be a competitor for sure. This Ascot with the special material is not going to be quite in the same price point. I think these are like $110 or something. But a knife that is closer in price point would be the Bird Raven 2, which I'm a big fan of as a budget knife. A little heftier, guys, thicker blade stock, slightly more lock bar tension, so this might be a knife that, and of course on washers. So this is a knife that's going to be a little more heavy duty. And maybe a place to look if let's say you want to have this knife to carry day to day, but you want something when you're going to be out in the woods or on a construction site or something, that might be a good pairing, if you will. Okay. What are my overall thoughts? Well, if you've been watching for the last 13 minutes, you know I like this knife, okay? I've got to say a huge thank you to Steel Will, Paulina over there for sending this out. I really have enjoyed this. This is a great little knife. It carries like it's not even there. It cuts very, very well. The action is super enjoyable if you want to sit around and flick it open on the couch or whatever. This is a real win from Steel Will. They've got another model coming up that's kind of similar in overall design, slightly different. And I think if it's anything like this, that'll be a huge win as well. And based on what I've been hearing from a couple of the reviewers, that's a pretty cool knife also. So yeah, this is definitely one to pick up if you're a Steel Will fan at all. If you're a fan of this design, definitely do it. If you're going to get one Steel Will this year, I would buy the Tasso. If you're going to get two, though, this is definitely a good second offering. Shortly, we'll have the Guyana video up probably in the next 2 weeks or so. That should be ready for a review. I kind of really enjoy this one, so I used it first, and I'll switch over now and start focusing on the other one to get a review ready for that in the next little while for you. Okay, there you go, guys. Thanks for watching. By the way, use my link down below to White Mountain Knives, and you can get yourself a discount. So if these are $50 or so, you can save $5, 10% off. All right, thanks again. Talk to you later.